Hello, I'm Nathan Foy, and we are still on the Force 13 Western Tour. We're not far from the end of it now, and I'm in beautiful New Orleans, and we're joined by one or two companions here as well. It's been a very interesting day, and it's just a couple of days until I arrive back in the United Kingdom, which is waiting for me with open arms in the freezing cold. But right now we're in fairly warm conditions, and we are joined by two Force 13 old hand stalwarts. We are joined by Nelson Mayer and Timothy Ringo. Hello to both of you. It's great to see you at last.
Nice to meet you.
We have known each other for quite a long time. Timothy over there since just before Hurricane Florence.
2018, yes.
2018, that's so long ago now. And Nelson even longer, during the Hurricane Matthew days in 2016.
Yeah, I remember finding the channel on YouTube, and those were back in the Skype days, and I remember reaching out to you and to the team to just see how I could be a part of it.
And it was great to get them on board. What was it that, why, let's start with you, Nelson, why did you've got a busy life, I mean, what was the catalyst during that point? Was it just a spur of the moment thing, or?
Well, living in New Orleans, hurricanes are a fact of life. So I was always interested in storms, tracking the storms on paper maps and things like that. But when I found newer media, that wasn't just the news reciting what the National Weather Service and the National Hurricane Center, who I've got great respect for, had said, I wanted to be a little bit a part of something that understood the storms more and maybe had a different impact than the blurbs that you would get on the news every night.
And that's what we've always tried to do over the years, I feel. Tim, your experience started, well, to be honest, you were tracking hurricanes back in your youth, weren't you?
I was, yes. The first storm I really tracked was Hurricane Andrew back in 1992.
Wow.
It started with a documentary done on NOAA, which was on PBS, which got me intrigued enough to start really digging into it into the 1995 season, where between the combination of the Weather Channel, which had John Hope, who was the National Hurricane Center director, when he stepped down and became a consultant for the Weather Channel for the tropical weather updates, between that and just being able to track throughout the years, it's been a passion that I've had. And what led me down the road of joining Force 13 is the fact that you were doing content on Lane, which was threatening Hawaii, and one of your updates came across my feed, and I gave it a quick listen, loved the music, which was hooked me into it. Your narration was phenomenal, it was very informative, and from there, it ignited a passion that I had had in about 25 years.
That is amazing.
And that is what led me down the path that I've been on.
I just find that amazing. Tim was actively tracking hurricanes in the 1995 season when I was born, and we are back here all together on our own little chat. And Tim, you've done updates for us, even Nelson's done updates for us over the past.
Yeah, we both have done updates. We both directed the U.S. channel. Nelson was my predecessor in late 2018. He passed the torch to me in 2019 when I held on for 2 years, making the U.S. channel a force in the severe weather community and the American weather scene. And it's just unfortunate that that channel has been put to rest, but it was definitely an experience that I enjoyed, and I still continue enjoying tracking severe weather, tropical cyclones, tornadoes, and being a part of this community that you've helped build and maintain for the last 11 years.
Well, thank you, Tim. Nelson, of course, New Orleans, well known for, certainly was a decade or two ago when, of course, Hurricane Katrina, the big storm of New Orleans. How have things been since? Do you remember it, by the way? I'm sure you do.
I do. I was in my junior year of college in 2005. My family lived across the lake in Mandeville at the time. We were not in New Orleans proper. I remember evacuating with my family to my apartment in Baton Rouge at the time, where I was at LSU, and watching the coverage on the news. And the amazing part was the morning after the main part of the storm, everything seemed like it was going to be okay.
Right.
It had been a Category 5 in the Gulf. Thankfully, it backed down a little bit as it approached the coast. And we thought with the slight eastward shift in track more towards Mississippi, that there would be very little impacts to New Orleans. And in fact, when we woke up, the news bore that out, that it had not been that bad. It was not a horrific event, only to find out as the hours went on that that's when the levees started to be breached, and the storm surge breached the levees, and then it started filling the city with water. And so scariest hurricane? I don't think so, because for the actual impacts, in terms of going through it, I was in Baton Rouge, so I was well west of any sort of central impacts. I think Hurricane Andrew, back when I was much younger, was scarier because didn't quite understand it, and certainly it wasn't the power that it was when it had passed through Florida. But I think it was the first time, I was 7 or 8 at the time, that I really understood what was going on and that it could be very detrimental. Obviously, the aftermath of Katrina was probably more traumatic in the long run in terms of just what it did to the city and, you know, damage to the house that we had lived in at the time and all that, but it could have been worse.
Yeah. Tim, North Carolina resident, what was your worst hurricane?
Hands down, Hurricane Matthew. I mean,
Matthew.
we went through Florence, we went through Isaias, we caught the outer bands of Dorian, but Matthew, for me personally, since I've been living in North Carolina, was probably the worst. Now, I know more residents will say, well, what about Floyd? What about Fran? What about Isabel? Those were 1996, 2000, 2003. Those were all well before I had moved down in 2011. So for me personally, Matthew in 2016 was probably the worst that I've experienced.
Wow. And finally, your thoughts on New Orleans, Tim? You've not been here yourself, have you?
I have not been here. This is my first time being down here. I will say, Nelson, for New Orleans, this is a beautiful city. I love the history, the architecture, and just the fact that this city, after everything it's gone through in the last 20 years, has bounced back and has showed its resiliency. It reminds me very similar of how Homestead was after Andrew. After it was completely wiped off the map, and the people came together and said, no, we are going to rebuild. We are going to show the rest of the world that we can take nature's works and bounce back with resiliency and pride. And I've seen it firsthand being down here. I know we had discussed recently, like the lower ninth had gotten the worst. I've seen coming off of the Pontchartrain Causeway off of Interstate 10, where there's still some scars from 20 years ago. But when I've been through the city, through Canal Street, down in the French Quarter, you wouldn't think that this was a city that had lost its hope 20 years ago. This is a thriving city, and it's amazing just how resilient it's been.
I think it's been, you know, a story of the city is important in terms of the resiliency and all that, but people have to move on with their lives. The things that are lost, you mourn them. The people that are lost, you mourn them. But we all have to live our day to day, and so when you're doing that, it was never an option of picking up and abandoning the city. It was, what do we do to get it fixed? And God willing, you know, a similar storm on a similar track does not have similar consequences, mainly due to human error.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll be seeing more of these two faces in the course of this year, but that's us checking out now. I'll see you again in London on Friday. But that's it from our Force 13 team here, our little cabal in New Orleans.